Boogeyman Ben. Horror Zone.
Hello my friends, it's your old buddy Boogeyman Ben here, and hope everyone's doing well. This is going to be my Comic Book Wednesday video for this week, which would be Wednesday, May 27th. Promised that my video for my favorite comic book villain would be the Comic Book Wednesday segment this week. I'm really excited to talk about my favorite comic book villain of all time, and this is a character if I can recall back, I've done over 400 videos on this channel, and I don't believe I've ever talked about the villain before. I have showcased, there are items in the room featuring this character's likeness, but he has been my favorite comic book villain since the 80s. He was a part of Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery, and for some reason it's always been, no matter what villain has shown up, not even Venom, Carnage, Doc Ock, none of those characters have ever meant to me as much as this character. And my favorite horror villain of all time is the Hobgoblin. So I've had this piece here in the room. He used to be up on the shelf over there. I've been a fan of this character since 1983, when this character first debuted in Amazing Spider-Man number 238. Absolutely love the character of the Hobgoblin. I had mentioned in the past that some of the Spider-Man comics I used to have I had sold. I sold off most of my Spider-Man collection. But the ones that featured the Hobgoblin I kept, because I love this character so much. I like him more than the Green Goblin, like him more than a lot of very popular Spider-Man villains, and I don't know why. I think it's just, again, timing. I was about 9 years old when this character debuted in Spider-Man, and I still have the very first issue where he first made his appearance, and that image and that cover, I was just sold, and the fact that his identity remained a mystery for many years also was a reason for me loving the character so much. So here's a handful of the Hobgoblin items I have here in the room. The oldest item here, even though I haven't had it as long as some of the others, he's a little dusty. But this figure was actually from the Secret Wars figure line, and this was one that never showed up in stores, at least where I live. I was never able to find him. I ended up buying him loose off of eBay. He was a little damaged, like his belts were kind of, drawn on these characters, or, they were like stickers that it's worn off. And he didn't come with his glider, he just came like this. But this figure is really, really expensive and really hard to find. And I found that they are re-releasing this figure, I think, late this year with original packaging and everything, but it's going for like $100. But I still think that's cheaper than what it actually goes for in the full packaging. In like the original packaging from the 80s. This is another bust that I got off of eBay as well. I had never seen this one in my local Flying Colors Comics, but I really like the look. I like that I love the sinister grin he's got right there. Really good likeness. Love the red eyes. Love that he's got two pumpkin bombs with him. And I love the glider, or the front of the back glider. And this is a rare one. They only made 3,000 of these. This is number, let's see, 820. This one right here is from the Spider-Man animated series that came out in 1994, I believe it debuted. And these figure lines were really, really popular. Remember, my buddy Mike Dodson had all of them in the package. I only got a couple of them, one of them being the big Hobgoblin here. And then up here, you can see I have that one and the Green Goblin. Those are both from the same cartoon series, and I always have them up there. You probably have seen them in many of the videos I shoot. This figure back here, I believe he's from, I forget which Marvel figure line he's from, but I always liked him because, of course, he came with the glider. He comes with this thing that's almost the thing you can put the glider on to make it move, but it just never worked right, so I took him off of it. But I really like the way this figure looks. I love the mask and the face. They really did a great job of that likeness right there. I think it's a Marvel Select, but I can't remember how long ago I got this. I'm going to say this is at least 7 years ago I got this figure. 6-7 years ago. And then this was a bust that I saw at Flying Colors Comics, but I never got it, so I ended up having to get it off eBay as well. And this is a rare one, too. I have the certificate of authenticity, but I don't know where it is right now. But, yeah, I really like this one, too. I love the pumpkin bomb he's holding in his hand. I don't like it as much as the other bust. I think this one is a better likeness, but this one is also very cool. And there's a new statue of the Hobgoblin right now, but it's like $300, and Flying Colors Comics has it, and I really want to buy it, but I just can't see shelling out that much money for a statue, and we got a vacation coming up, but I really want to get it, and it kills me every time I see it in there because I really want to buy it. But yeah, just some of my Hobgoblin toys, ones that I'm really proud of and happy that I still own. This is the very first appearance of the Hobgoblin in Amazing Spider-Man number 238, and I still remember picking this book up, and I was just fascinated by the artwork on the cover here, because you know, it shows this guy ripping Spider-Man's costume in half, or this thing, and I didn't know what it was, and it looked creepy, and I liked monsters, so I remember having my mom pick this one up for me. I remember we got it at a liquor store that it's still in the town where I grew up, but it's not in the same location where I got this. But yeah, I'm so happy that I still have this one. It's in pretty bad shape, but you know, again, I've had this book since I was 9 years old, and back then I wasn't into collecting. I just wanted a book to read that had a monster in it. So yeah, like I said, the book is in pretty rough shape, but it was an amazing book to pick up, and I was fascinated with the character from the beginning, because as you find out through the course of the story, is that the Hobgoblin or whoever is the Hobgoblin is using the Osborn formula that Norman Osborn used to become the Green Goblin, and it's such a good story. I think Roger Stern just crafted an amazing story that just left readers guessing, like, who is this character? And see, the character is always in the shadows. You never see his face. And the first reveal has always been one of my favorites. And me and my buddy Mike Dodson, we were really into these comics, and we, you know, just as little kids, we were just always like, who is he? Who is the Hobgoblin? And we would guess and guess and guess. And, you know, each time the character appeared, you thought maybe, you know, there'd be some more information about who he was. And Roger Stern just did a good job about keeping people in the dark on who he was, and sort of throwing you off with red herrings. Like in this story, you think Spider-Man's unmasked him, and this was early. I mean, this was only, you know, he'd only been in the book series a few months at this point, or a few issues. And this turned out to not be the Hobgoblin at all. And the character of Lefty Donovan was framed to be the Hobgoblin in this one. And of course it wasn't. It was something that the real Hobgoblin just put in motion. And then you'd have another series with the character. And you'd always wonder, well, are we going to find out who he is this time? And in this particular one, you thought maybe the character died, which wasn't the case. Let's let that shot right there. That's one of my favorite issues. Then in issue number 275, they had this, it was an annual kind of a bigger issue, The Return of the Hobgoblin. And in the next issue, they promised that it would be the final reveal. They would unmask him. I mean, the last page of the book even said, "You must not miss next issue, unmasked at last." So when issue 276 came out, I remember I was in 6th grade at the time. I just remember I was so excited. And I remember calling my friend Mike and asking him, did they really do it? Because I was sick. I remember I was sick at the time. My mom was picking up the comic for me at the comic book store that I used to go to, Pinole Toy and Comic, which is long gone, unfortunately. But I remember she was picking it up for me, and I couldn't wait. I called my friend Mike and asked him, was it the Hobgoblin? Did they unmask him? And he tells me that it wasn't him, that it was another, they threw another red herring. Don't get me wrong, though. They did make it seem like they were going to show his face here, where Spider-Man throws some of his webbing into the mask and the Hobgoblin rips it off. You can kind of see his face, but not really. Then he and Spider-Man have a big battle at the end, and this big explosion happens, and Spider-Man sees that he's knocked out. He rips the mask off, and it looks like it's Flash Thompson. But, of course, we know it's not Flash Thompson. But it doesn't matter because the cops see him in the Goblin gear and they arrest him. And at the end of the book, you see Hobgoblin saying that he had framed Thompson. So you know that they're not going to release who he is anytime soon. The next series that the Hobgoblin would prominently be featured in would be the Gang War series, which was a 5-part series that would lead up to what would be the final reveal of the character. Here's part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5. And then in the winter of 1987, number 289 would come out, and it would say that it wasn't a trick, that this is going to be the reveal of the Hobgoblin. Now, what I didn't know as a kid, and didn't find out till later, and I'll get to that point later, is that Roger Stern had left the book. So he wasn't writing the story at this point. So pretty much what happened here was the person that took over writing the book pretty much came up with their own interpretation of who the Hobgoblin was. And what you would come to find out is that the Hobgoblin was newspaper reporter Ned Leeds, who was somebody that was one of the suspects. Like I said, there was a lot of red herrings thrown into the mix. But the problem with this is that the Leeds character was killed in, it was like a Wolverine versus Spider-Man book. So this whole thing happening here was told in flashback. And you see right here where the Foreigner's men kill him. Then the book would also introduce the second Hobgoblin, who was Jason Masondale, and he was actually Jack-O-Lantern before, and then he picks up the reins of the character in this book. Now, the Masondale Hobgoblin was not, I wasn't as big of a fan of his as the original interpretation. I think, one, because the mystery was gone. You knew who this guy was. So when he first showed up, I mean, cool, he looks like the Hobgoblin, but he was just a little bit different for me than the original. But I still like the character. The difference between there was minor differences in terms of how the character looked as opposed to the first Hobgoblin. One was his costume was more shredded. He had holes in it. The cape was a little bit more shredded. The other Hobgoblin, the original, was really, his costume was very neat and it didn't have any rips or tears in it. And I like in this book because he has the little skull bones, which are kind of cool and new. So yeah, when the Masondale Hobgoblin showed up, he just wasn't as interesting to me as the original Hobgoblin. But that all changed with the Inferno storyline. Now, the Inferno storyline, it was originally, it spanned across most Marvel comics. It was featured heavily in the X-Men comics. But what happened was all of these demons descend upon New York City. And it made a major change for the Masondale Hobgoblin, who pretty much ends up selling his soul to a demon. Now, back in the 1988-89, there were several Spider-Man comic series, and this would span for a while, but, you know, you'd have Spectacular Spider-Man, so the story pretty much started here. And you can see there's Hobgoblin in the distance. And then featured in Web of Spider-Man number 47, The Hobgoblin Returns, The Awakening. And this book is fantastic because you have Harry Osborn, who's on the brink of going nuts, and you have the Hobgoblin attacking his family here, which was awesome because Harry intervenes and attacks the Hobgoblin. And just great writing. I absolutely love this book. And what this book led to was something that I wanted to see and my buddy Mike wanted to see so badly. It would lead to one of the greatest moments in comic books for me growing up. And still to this day, one of my favorite comics ever. Here at the end of this issue, you have Harry Osborn pulling out the Green Goblin costume. And then in Amazing Spider-Man 312, which was a continuation of Web number 47, you would have the Green Goblin versus the Hobgoblin, which is still one of the most iconic, I still think one of the most iconic covers ever, by the wonderful Todd McFarlane. And the art in this book is just fantastic. So the story would continue in Spectacular Spider-Man number 147, and this is when everything changes for the Hobgoblin. And the book starts off, he's all pissed off because he got his ass handed to him by Green Goblin and Spider-Man in Amazing Spider-Man number 312. And it's here that he trades his soul for power with the demon Aster. And in Web of Spider-Man number 48, you had your first book featuring the possessed demon Hobgoblin. The Demon Hobgoblin would stay around for quite a few years, and these are some of the issues that he was featured in. My favorite being Spider-Man number 6, which features the amazing writing and story art by Todd McFarlane. McFarlane drew and wrote this character perfectly. Amazing, amazing art. Then in 1992, the Demon character and the Hobgoblin were split into two characters, the Demon character becoming a character named Demogoblin. I was never a huge fan of the Demogoblin character and was kind of glad when they killed it off. And then, Mason Dale would come back as just a normal-looking Hobgoblin. And again, just wasn't as interesting as he was before when he had the demon personality. Then something really cool happened in late 1996, early 1997. Roger Stern actually came back and wrote a limited series called Hobgoblin Lives. And in this series, you find out who the real Hobgoblin was. And he actually kills Mason Dale at the beginning of the Hobgoblin Lives. And at the very end, you find out who it was, and this is who the Hobgoblin was supposed to have been all those years ago when the writers decided to make the big reveal that it was Ned Leeds. It wasn't Ned Leeds. I love the artwork in this book. See, at this point, I didn't really care for the way they were writing the Hobgoblin. I didn't like the way he looked with just the new look and everything. And then this scene where he kills Mason Dale, and then he dons the attire again as the Hobgoblin. And this book is so well written and really harkens back to those early Amazing Spider-Mans that really captivated me and really got me into the character. And here's the reveal. You find out it was Roderick Kingsley, who had a twin brother, Daniel Kingsley, and that's why he was able to throw people off, because Daniel would wear a wig to look like Roderick, and Roderick was the Hobgoblin. Kingsley would come back as the character in one of my favorite stories, which was Goblins at the Gate, and this is before the Spider-Man series kind of took a dump and they relaunched it, but this was a great series because it actually had the real Hobgoblin facing the real Green Goblin, and Spider-Man caught in the middle. After the Goblins at the Gate storyline, the character was pretty much MIA for almost, I'm going to say, 12 years. And then he came back in The Amazing Spider-Man number 649 in the storyline big time. What pissed me off about this storyline is that they supposedly killed Roderick Kingsley, and this time it was Phil Urich who had played the Green Goblin as a good guy in a limited series back in the 90s. He kind of goes nuts, and he ends up supposedly killing the Hobgoblin, and I was pissed because I was like, wait, I waited all this time for them to bring him back just to kill him again. So Phil Urich became the third Green Goblin in this series. That is until this book series, which came out as Hobgoblin versus Hobgoblin, and you find out that Phil Urich actually killed Daniel Kingsley and not Roderick Kingsley. So Daniel was posing as his brother in the Hobgoblin guise, and that's how he got killed. So then you had the goblins pitted against each other in this book series. I don't really collect Spider-Man anymore, but every time the character has come back, I've picked up the issues. And even recently, there's been a Hobgoblin limited series. And this is with Roderick Kingsley, the original Hobgoblin, where he is trying to go legit as a superhero. But of course, we all know he's not. And over the years, just any book featuring the character I would pick up. Moon Knight, Darkhawk, Power Pack, Doctor Strange. This was the Green Goblin series I was talking about, where Phil Urich was the good Green Goblin. That's the Mason Dale Hobgoblin. And of course there was Spider-Man the Animated Series, which had the character as well. So I guarantee if you didn't know a lot about the Hobgoblin before this video, you sure do now. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this video, talking about my favorite supervillain, which is the Hobgoblin. And if you guys are fans of the character as well, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what people have to say about him. Yeah, he's always going to be my favorite villain, and sometimes I forget how much I love the character, and just doing this comic book, Comic Book Wednesday where I'm talking about him just reminded me how much of a fan I am. So thanks everyone so much for watching this Comic Book Wednesday, focusing on my favorite supervillain, the Hobgoblin. I hope everyone has a great evening. Thanks so much for watching. Take it easy. Peace.